Hello. Hi, good day. Welcome to Pop Talks. Today it's tapping into talent, ensuring vibrancy in the pop workplace. Now, I'm Jim Lawson. I'm manager of outreach development for ABC at the American Board for Certification, and I have the honor of moderating this session today. Today's continuing education course focuses on the pop workforce, pop prosthetics, orthotics workforce. Now, those of us working or affiliated with the profession know that it's a vibrant and dynamic career full of talented and creative people that must navigate the stresses, the challenges, the fatigues of working in health and healthcare profession. Now, this discussion is about ways to address and mitigate against burnout and find the joy and meaning in the work. Now, before we dive in, we have a few programming notes. We have plenty of time for Q&A, so feel free to share any questions as you get them, as if they come to your head, as you get them, feel free to put them in the Q&A box throughout the discussion. And want to remind you, this is the first in a series of 3 Pop Talks. The series is worth 3.75 Category 1 business credits or 1.25 credits per session itself. So be sure to take the quiz after this course for continuing education credits. Now, with that, I would like to, and I have the honor of introducing our experts, our panelists today. First of all, Mr. Gerald Stark is the Director of Clinical Operations and Technical Support for Bionit Labs. Now, he holds a PhD in organizational learning and leadership, and he's taught at Northwestern University, Georgia Tech, and the University of Tennessee. Now, Jerry has served on the board of directors for the International Society of Prosthetics and Orthotics, ISPO, and the National Commission on Orthotics and Prosthetic Education, and the American Academy of Orthotists and Prosthetists, where he is the incoming president. Now, our next guest, our expert, Terry Cuffle, is the interim executive director of AOPA and past president of AOPA. And she's also the vice president and founding co-owner of Arise Orthotics and Prosthetics Incorporated in Minnesota. Terry is also very active in the profession. She is a director on the boards of the Minnesota Society of Orthotists, Prosthetists, and Podorthists, and also on the board, oh, really good organization, at Wiggle Your Toes, an amputee nonprofit organization. I love the name of that group. She also teaches the master's program at Concordia University. So thank you to both of our guests today, both of our speakers, for joining us for the discussion. I would now like to turn it over to our speakers.
Honored to be here, Jim. Thank you for the invitation.
Yes, thank you for having us, Jim.
Certainly.
So really, this comes from 10 ways to motivate clinicians. And really, there's not just one answer, right, Jim? I mean, everyone's a little bit different. But the thing is that I thought I'd introduce some things that I've discovered in surveys. And then Terry has some excellent real life applications. So we'll go to the next slide. You know, there's probably more than two different groups, but there's two main groups in leadership. There's the human relational approach, and these are people who are sales, marketing, and clinicians, right? And then the techno-processual approach, and these are engineers, accountants. You know, the clinician actually exists right through the middle of both, and they're rewarded in two very different ways. This makes the clinician a little bit schizophrenic in a way because the world sees us one way and we exist another. The two ways that they're, bonused in a sense, rewarded, an engineer, an accountant looks for, they want to be held in high esteem and reverence with respect. They'll still take a bonus, but they want to really be held in that level of reputation. Human relational approach really likes public accolade. They love seeing road marks and milestones. So as clinicians, we exist somewhere in the middle.
Well, let me ask Terry. Terry,
Yeah.
in your experience, running an organization and practices, do you see this as well?
Yes, and Jerry and I talked earlier about this slide and really focusing on leadership and are practitioners inherently good leaders. And so that was something that I wanted to share. Of course, I would say yes. We're all good leaders when we are called to be, and sometimes not so much. Sometimes we fall short. So a good practitioner, a good administrator can often have leadership qualities like expertise, strong leadership skills, and credibility. But that doesn't automatically equate to being a good leader. Additional skills are required, like communication, collaboration, and the ability to inspire others. Those are all crucial for effective leadership, which may or may not be present in a skilled practitioner or an administrator.
Yeah, that's something they have to learn after school in a sense.
True. Well, let's go on to the next slide.
So really, when you think about stress, anxiety, and this word called burnout, stress is the psychophysiologic reaction to a threat that's real or imagined in your mind. And anxiety is long-term exposure. Burnout could actually be really a fatigue, but a level of fatigue that's really almost depression. And so when you think about any sort of anxiety, even fun things that are fun, you go and do something fun, it's a challenge, it's not boring. The thing is that stress can kind of help motivate you to keep going, but then it turns into this, you get over the hump, it becomes exhaustion, fatigue. And here's the thing, long-term anxiety actually changes not how you think psychologically, but also the very architecture of your brain. It changes you physically. So you're unable to actually pull out of your normal way of dealing with things. So when you become disengaged, when you become really, you know that things need to happen, but you just can't provide it any longer.
Yeah, Jerry, and I'll add to that. I like to coin the phrase work-life fatigue rather than use the
Sure.
phrase burnout. And yeah, it's evident in any organization. Yes, anxiety and this work-life fatigue can be found anywhere prevalent in the workplace. These issues that affect employees in an industry due to factors like high workload, poor work-life balance, inadequate support systems. And these can contribute to chronic stress, leading to anxiety and work life fatigue. There are no organization that is completely immune to these concerns. There's some key factors to consider in this work life fatigue as an occupational phenomenon. The World Health Organization classifies this as a syndrome that results from chronic workplace stress, making it an occupational issue that can occur in any workplace for a clinician, for an administrator, or an associate. The impact on organizations at high levels can negatively impact productivity or job satisfaction, absenteeism, and employee retention, which leads to significant organizational costs. So employers are positioned well and benefit from creating and maintaining a positive culture and a workplace environment.
One
Yeah,
of the just a thought real quick before we get to the statistics, Jerry. Um,
yeah.
Even success can create the stress and the fatigue. Success after success after success. Wow, that can even get down to you too. It's kind of ironic, but it works in that direction as well.
It's generative, Jim. You know, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi talked about this idea of flow. When we have the perfect ability to address things, any sort of stressor, in a sense, we can answer it readily. So we get in this sense of flow. I don't know if you've ever done something and hours have passed by. So that's really great. So that's not burnout, and that's not necessarily, that's a generative stress in a sense. It's when it becomes like you can't be able to fulfill it. And I was just going to add that not only employees feel this, definitely mid managers and even leaders and owners feel burnout, but they just keep coming back. Yeah, so I wanted to look at this in O&P. What's the effect of burnout? And that's Terry, that's what they called the phenomenon burnout, but we could call it a work-life fatigue. That's fine. What I found was this seemed to mirror how people adopt different types of products. So 11 to 15 years had the highest level of burnout, which I typically saw, and it affected what types of options they look at in terms of what they choose for O&P components. The thing that was a little bit surprising was that on average, O&P people are at risk for burnout. 1 in 3 are right there in terms of changing what they think psychologically. They're just kind of answering the need every day. But 1 in 10 are in severe levels, which actually is a physical change to how they think, the physical difference in their brain. But the one thing that was surprising to me was that 1 to 5 years of experience was the second highest. This is a bit worrisome to me. They should be the happiest. They should have the least amount of burnout, and yet they're showing quite a bit of stress and strain based on what they're feeling. And what was the lowest level was 26 years or higher. And we probably know the answer for that because they see the light at the end of the tunnel, I think, right, Jim?
You got it.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, with the workplace fatigue. I have been married to an O&P practitioner for 35 years now. And we've worked together in the office for more than 25 years together. So I know firsthand how this fatigue and the stress of working as a clinician and owning a business manifests itself in the day to day. We try to stay positive, and we look to appreciation. What is appreciation? How do we appreciate one another? Actually, the number one employee motivator isn't money, but it's appreciation and gratitude. So when we look to how can we appreciate the simple words of thank you, thanking employees, staff, one another, being appreciative to one another, showing it also. When people feel valued, they show up, they feel differently. And appreciation does a lot of things. It boosts morale. People thrive when their efforts are recognized. It strengthens loyalty. Gratitude builds trust, and trust drives retention. It enhances productivity. Employees do more when they know their work matters. It reduces burnout or work-life fatigue, and that skyrockets when people don't feel valued. And finally, it creates a winning culture. Teams that lift each other up rise together. So here's the simple truth. Recognition isn't about occasional grand gestures. It's about consistently making your people feel seen, heard, and valued in any work environment.
So I
Good
thought about
point.
all those, and I thought about like what are some of the 10 that we could think about. So we'll go on to the next 10 there, Jim.
Very good.
Part of the problem or the challenge for us in O&P, we just don't know who's coming through the door next. We're kind of like firefighters or ER doctors. So how do you get ready for the unexpected, the unknown unknowns? Well, it's through personal preparation. Do you have the right skills? I mean, that's a question you need to ask yourself. Is your team prepared for what could happen, even the things that are unexpected? And how is your response time? Can you anticipate the future? Can you plan for it? And then the context, do you have the right equipment? Do you have the right people? And how are you measuring that success? Are things that were challenges, do they serve as tests for you to get better the next time? That kind of thing.
Let me ask Terry, as a co-founder and a business owner, how do you set up for success? What are some of the thoughts on that?
So we like to make lemons out of lemonade when the lemons
Love it.
come our
Love it.
way. Again, Jim, we've known each other a long time. My glass is half full, not half empty. So having a positive view on life and work and getting through a day, even when it's a difficult day, that's how we started out.
Very good. So let's continue moving on here.
So part of this means embracing the autonomy. Clinicians are by nature autonomous people. They love making decisions. So you have to think about how you give them a shocking amount of autonomy. So if you give them that sense of ownership, that can be very powerful. And if you let them take their preferred approach, if you can be very flexible, that can be difficult, right? As a manager, you want them to do it your way. But the thing is, clinicians are very independent and they want to be respected among their group. So if they're allowed to come up with their own solutions within guardrails, this freedom can go a long way.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And I think Jerry and I talked about picking the right people and working with the right people. Well, sometimes people pick us to work with as well. So, what organizations can do to promote employee ownership and degree of that freedom is really encourage professional growth and development. Also, implement healthy work practices, encourage regular breaks, flexible work arrangements, and reasonable workload expectations. That's a tough one, I know, right now in our office. Develop supportive leadership, train managers to recognize signs of work life fatigue, and provide necessary support to employees. Make sure we talk about and offer employee assistance programs when necessary, access to mental health resources and counseling, et cetera.
Very good.
So I actually surveyed the group and I wanted to know what were the causes of some of this burnout. And some of the best things are the comments, but one is volume. The thing is that we're not seeing more patients than we did when I was younger, when I was a resident. But what has changed is the amount of documentation, which has more than doubled. When you look at the number of office staff, for instance, That's pretty much doubled in the last 20 years or so. So each practitioner feels like they have a limited time to actually be a practitioner. Unfortunately, one of them is management. We are the problem sometimes. So the pressure for revenue is very high, and it's a business. The thing is, though, many practitioners don't feel in control of that because they don't know who's coming through the door. They're also not in charge of the negotiated contracts or how well that's implemented, but they can be in charge of how the documentation is processed. So they wonder, how much of my clinical skills truly being valued? And this reimbursement helplessness not only affects the employees, it affects the owners and managers as well. They can't determine this revenue. So that very high anxiety that they face, they really have no control over it. So this get this sense of learned helplessness, which is actually a term coined when no matter what the impulse is, whatever the conditions are, you have no effect on it. And for the younger people, career disenchantment. They were looking for something that they would be researching and participating in development. And that when you start out, you have to start out somewhere. So sometimes there's a lot of carry water moments that you have to support the rest of the group. They also have an exceedingly high amount of debt. And they sometimes wonder, are they getting the best salary compared to friends in other areas of healthcare?
Yeah, and this affects all groups, right? So generally speaking, this feeling of work-life fatigue, it happens in any and every work environment. It's a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion that can be caused by prolonged or excessive stress. And it can be caused by a variety of factors. These factors include work-related factors, personal factors, lifestyle factors. Work-related factors, a high workload, long hours, lack of control over the work tasks, unclear expectations or job responsibilities, poor work-life balance, lack of support from managers or colleagues, negative work environment. Personal factors include perfectionism, pessimism, lack of coping mechanisms, poor time management, chronic stress in other areas of life, family or health, and lifestyle factors, lack of sleep or poor diet, lack of exercise, and potentially substance abuse. So major life change, again, another thing that may affect us in the work environment. So being cognizant of all of these things and potentially working on ourselves, right? That's a skill we need to all learn.
Just throwing this real quick, I have the fortunate opportunity to speak at every MSOP program, every master's program across the United States. And I do get questions about the disenchantment sometimes. I do get questions about, okay, I've got this debt that I'm paying for my school, and when I'm working, am I going to be able to pay that off? Am I going to be able to do what I want? Am I going to be respected? Am I going to be valued when I get to a practice? Now, I see maybe three-quarters of the students are all very gung-ho and very positive about it, but I see some who are kind of looking at me like, so Jim, what kind of answers do you have for me? So this is a true and it's a real issue.
Mhm. And it's all about a risk and gamble. We're all taking gambles and risks. I was a career changer. I was a mechanical engineer, had a pretty good life making surgical instruments. And then I came home and said, I want to change my career. And luckily, I got all the support I needed. But when you look at what some of the students are facing, I think it's if we have some understanding of where they're at. The context has changed a little bit. They have a lot more to know as CPOs right away. I started out as a prosthetist, then learned orthotics later. That's not the way they do it now. It's all together. So you really have to have some understanding at least, and maybe that helps us address how to attract the very best all stars that we can.
Very good. So the next slide.
So this comes into what Terry was just mentioning. If we take an active part in developing people's careers, then they start to feel like maybe that risk was worth this reward. So when we establish a clear path that shows how they're progressing as clinicians, and people talk about titles that don't have any additional remuneration, right? But they still want to have that title change. They want to know that they're progressing. So at the end of the day, where is the destination? For instance, if someone comes out of school, they get certified, that's the next task. And then you say, okay, well, you're going to work for 40 years as clinical prosthetist, or clinical O&P provider. So they need to show some sort of progress in their career.
Yes, agreed. And to develop that career path for anyone, practitioner, administrator, association person, we really need to prioritize self care by setting boundaries, taking breaks, managing workload, exploring flexible work options, pursuing professional development opportunities, and actively seeking alignment between your passions and your work, potentially even considering a career pivot when it's appropriate, all while communicating openly with your employer about your needs and seeking support when it's required. Some of the key strategies to implement: self-assessment and reflection. Identify the factors contributing to your burnout in your current role. Analyze your values, your strengths, and interests to find a better career fit. Consider what aspects of work are draining you and which are fulfilling. For work-life balance adjustments, set boundaries, clearly define work hours, and actively disconnect outside of work time. Flexible work arrangements, explore options like remote work, flex time, work on the weekends, compressed work weeks. Prioritize your breaks, incorporate regular short breaks throughout the workday to recharge. And time management, so important. Develop effective strategies to manage your workload and prioritize your tasks in the day.
Well, you guys are sharing excellent information. I want to make sure we also have time for our Q&A at the end. So let's go ahead and move forward there, Jerry. This is great.
Yep. So what would motivate you? This is where it shows, we can go through this quickly. It really shows you that although more money is important, revenue, we work for a reason, it's a greater chance for promotion and greater recognition from peers and being held in respect. This is really what's important.
I think we all agree on that. Very good.
So it's not just something we say, it's for real. All right, we can pop to the next one. So the next is providing learning opportunities. And are we able to, as managers and leaders, to provide that? So we'll go to the next one. So this slide looks complex, and I apologize for you, but the thing is, I looked at what are the things that managers knew they were important for their employees, but they felt least able to provide. So the things with the biggest delta, so the greatest value, and these were communicating effectively in the clinic, ability to lead a team, ability to build clinical expertise in areas they did not know with credibility, and developing clinical business and revenue awareness. Now, these are things that clinicians know are important, but they can't necessarily provide.
Yeah, and I'll add that to this, things that leaders value in any work environment. Leaders value integrity and respect and communication and courage and resilience and self-awareness and accountability and humility. These values help leaders inspire and motivate others to achieve their goals.
How true. How true. So moving on.
So part of that is investing the tools, not just the tools like a Troutman, a brand new Troutman. It's the tools like the processes. So nothing's as frustrating as outdated equipment, but there's a lot that can be said with the world around you. I know sometimes people work in a basement of a house sometimes, right? And so sometimes when you think about how people invest in their business and how they're investing in the processes of the clinic, this can say a lot about how they're investing in you as an individual.
Yeah, and this holds true for systems on the operation sides as well: software systems, billing practice management systems, phones, etc.
That's right. Supplying the tools that you need to do the job can be extremely helpful. And the next slide.
So we see this in terms of innovation, burnout, and optimism. What's interesting, you think people who are burned out aren't receptive to innovation. In fact, they are loving innovation. In fact, they think it'll save them almost to an unhealthy level. Zero point 0.7 is a pretty high level for behavior correlation. So the thing is, they're looking for something to save them, whether it's AI, whether it's CAD/CAM, whether it's osseo integration. They're looking for that technology that will bail them out in some way. But here's the other part. They don't want to be the first to put it in practice. They think it's too risky. And because they're burned out, because they're fatigued, they don't know how to put it into practice. So there's a strong inverse correlation. So they value it, but they don't want to be the first one to take the gamble, right? To be on the bleeding edge of technology.
Terry, have you come across that as well?
Yes, but again, I'm not on the clinical side. I'm on the
Right.
administrative side. So when something happens on the tech side, I ask my husband to take care of it.
Very good. Very good. Excellent point. Okay, the next slide.
So creating enticing and challenging projects. I put this picture up there because it's kind of funny. It's where you had a sixth or a second thumb. Somebody developed this. And being part of a group that gives you 10% of your time for projects you would like to do. And this is something IBM did and some of the other Silicon Valley groups. So 10% of the time of their time is spent creating something that could help add to the office. And this really helps give them a sense of autonomy again, and it injects new energy and new thought. I had a group one time, they wanted to build their own 3D printer, right? I don't know if it would really work. In fact, I don't think it ever did, but they were totally engaged in it at all times. So I think that's one thing. If they could get engaged, re-engaged, and fall in love with O&P again.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, sure, absolutely. But the goal ultimately at the end of the day is also to keep the lights on. So, but a
So,
little
yeah,
fun is awesome. And it's something that, for example, we have a 3D printer in the office and at home, and we like to play with it. So we like to see if we can create things that are good for the work environment, and then some that are not, that are just pure fun.
I should have to add that IBM said it had to be approved by the manager, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Okay.
And so we get what O&P people get. We get the how innovation can improve our quality of life, enhance our relationship with the patient, and provide better mobility. There are three things we don't get, though. We have a learning disability. We don't know how to make new things more productive. We don't like being the first to use or the first to figure out. So we reach out to others who have done it before. We reach out to our groups, whether it's Academy, AOPA, or ABC. We're looking for other groups to help us through that. And the more successful people are the ones that employ that to a greater degree.
Yeah, and with regard to quality of life, enhanced relationships, at the end of the day, what motivates us, right? It is truly all about our patients. And I asked my staff, what helps you survive a hard work day? And they said, working with friends, the camaraderie, music, what's thinking about what's for lunch, and really the goal of helping the patients receive their best results. So then we turn to work-life balance as a key, thinking about what's to come after work as well. Work hard, play hard.
Very good.
Okay.
And moving on.
Yeah, directly connecting to our mission and vision and make it very clear so that activities can become more meaningful and we're contributing in the center. They talk about followership, not just leadership. Followership means we're contributing to the overall vision, not just the leader. It's not just on our manager. It's not just on our boss. It's our responsibility to take that mission and vision and strategy to heart.
All right. And I will add to that. Connecting to the mission means going beyond your desk, your administrative desk, or the exam room, helping your patients beyond that, your clinic site, to find a deeper connection to your work. Become an advocate, join an O&P society or a nonprofit, volunteer your time and your talents at a mobility clinic or at a legislative event or at a fundraiser. Join the So Everybody Can Move movement in your state, or start it if you don't have it. Support the work of AOPA's federal initiative, the Medicare O&P Patient-Centered Care Act. Attend the AOPA Policy Forum. This year it's virtual and it's on May 6th. And I think they're going to drop a link in the chat for registration for that. And in your office, ring the bell. What we like to do to connect to our mission, we just coined the phrase ring the bell. We actually don't really have a bell in the office, but we pull all staff in when a patient is taking his or her first steps. So whether it's the front office administrator or the technician or the practitioner or an owner, we all come together and celebrate that first step together.
Both of you, when you take this advice, it's not just a job, it's a career, and you put yourself into it. It makes such a difference. It truly does. So
Yep.
moving on to the next slide.
So when you're talking about leaning in, and that's what's so important. That's when this idea of quiet quitting becomes a little bit of an issue. We don't know what the patient or what the practitioner has done or not done. And so when we don't know that, we can go to the next slide if we can.
Mhm.
This is when quiet quitting. So it's the effects of emotional labor. We're the outward appearance of the company. How we act, how we feel about innovation. If we have a loss of sense of autonomy, we feel that we've hidden it from the patient, but we don't. We imprint directly on them. They see our unease. And so that's something that when you think about you're trying to get someone to accept an upper limb prosthesis, for instance, it has a direct effect when you're stressed. And you probably see this in teachers, bank tellers. You see this on the airplane, right? When a flight attendant's on the fifth leg of her 2-day trip, it's really difficult. And so this creates this push and pull of what we appear like to the patient.
Makes a
They
big
call,
difference.
yeah. So really recognizing that good work. Terry's mentioned a few of these things, but it's really recognizing your all-stars and rock stars, right? The people who really do lean in, you really need to appreciate them. So we could even pop to the next slide. When you give a 3% raise to everyone, you're not recognizing those all-stars. And so when you look at this slide, which shows that around 15% of your workers are actually pulling back 30 to 40%. You don't know what you're not getting. And this isn't just employees, this is managers too. They're actually to a point where they've pulled back enough. They don't mind other people putting in more time than them. So that's the thing. You need to protect that top part of that, putting in more than what is expected, that 40%. You need to protect them. Yeah.
Yeah, and it all goes back to what we started with, was showing appreciation and gratitude for work products, saying thank you, potentially giving an award or giving a bonus structure, incentivizing best work.
We'll go to the next slide. So this quiet quitting, which is really kind of it's also a misnomer. They think employers came up with that, but quiet quitting means if I'm pulling back, I'm not leaning in and giving more than what I could. This is affecting your main work area, your workers from 6 to 20 years. These are the main areas that are driving the workers that are driving things forward. So I'll go to the next slide. I find this one pretty interesting. So the 11 to 15 years is the most burned out, but the 16 to 20 years have the highest level of quiet quitting. So they're negotiating that. Maybe I'm not going to get out of this career what I had hoped, so I'm going to pull back just a little bit. Here's the thing for any business owner, you need them to lean in. You need them to provide a little extra bit of themselves if you want to survive. We're not even talking about profitability. We're talking about long term. You need that extra bit of creativity and energy.
And they also serve as a good example for those in the 0 to 11, 15 years. They see someone who has been there that long and putting themselves and putting every effort into that position. That's a great example. It's a great mentor.
So Terry's right. So you reward those people publicly within your culture. They see that that effort is really admired and they aspire to that. So having a little competition isn't a bad thing, really. Okay, we'll go to the next one. So, Terry, you mentioned this one, making some fun time. And you can't schedule a fun time, but you can let people be flexible it, and having fun with what they do. What we do is very fun. We make people walk again. We need to celebrate that more often. Sometimes I don't do that enough, right? What we do is really incredibly awesome. And sometimes we need to let that kind of be expressed. I had one friend tell me he likes to measure not necessarily outcomes, but how many smiles he got that day.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that. Yeah, company culture, it really starts from the top down. If we create and maintain a positive, respectful, productive work environment, we can find joy in our work product and our interactions with patients and our fellow colleagues. You can have some fun, have a party, have a potluck, or have a picnic outside.
Okay, we'll go to the next one. So when we look at how happy you are, well, our group tells us they're 5.82 on a scale of 10. So they're moderately happy. That could improve. And honestly, some are just providing the bare minimum. So the thing is, when you provide a little bit more energy, when you have a little bit more autonomy, that in itself is fun. So in general, this is something on average we don't see more of, but I think it could really help retain some of our best people. So we'll go to
Yeah.
the next one.
Yeah, and well, Jerry
But
asked
wait,
me,
yeah, let's hear Terry. Yeah.
is
Yeah.
happiness a good measure? And I would say absolutely. I like happy. I encourage happy. I live in my happy little world that I have created. So, but happy may have a different meaning for different people, but I still do believe that happy is a very good measure of this work-life balance.
Yeah, I think, well, one of my engineering friends, he's engineering clinician, and he said, I just want to be effective. I'm not sure if I'm happy ever, but I just want to know what makes me happy is that my efforts were effective. And I think about that all the time. Yeah. So all of this creates this learning community, learning, leadership, education, development, innovation. They're all really the same thing. It's a bunch of people getting together and collaborating and creating a new future. One of the things I noticed that groups that are much more innovative, it's not that they don't argue, they argue all the time. It's that it's tolerated and they argue well. It doesn't get personal, and that's very generative and actually kind of fun.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, we are constantly creating our own learning environment and community. Every patient that comes through our door presents differently, and
Mhm.
every single one has a different insurance policy.
Oh,
And that requires us to continuously learn and educate ourselves in different ways. So become that expert, for each time. Bring yourself to that level. Know what your company policies are, but go beyond and really try to work with that patient, obviously to the best of our abilities. And talking about when we talk about education per se, we also talk about attending meetings at your state or national level. And you can obviously work with the Academy and AOPA at the assemblies to get your CEUs. Constantly strive to continually create that learning environment and community for yourself. Share your passion for your work and potentially be a speaker yourself, submit for speaking.
right.
Uh, and, taking on a resident and a residency program really is something that helps each one of us in the office be a mentor to that person on the administrative side and on the clinical side as well. So really, really focusing on creating that learning community is really essential to help with that work-life balance.
Terry, you did so well. You slid right into number 10, which is the next one. When we look at the pillars that you just mentioned, these are pillars that I looked at from engineering management for leadership and organization, operations and accounting, business and revenue development, clinical decision making. These were all chosen by the managers so that you look at how do you influence leadership practice, innovation management. This is a curriculum right here, right? To help engage people better. And really, these are all things that give us anxiety because weren't trained them. But if we can learn them, just like physicians, the business practices, we make ourselves more valuable. And I won't go through all of them. And the number 10, I think, Terry, you mentioned this one. I love the Marine badge, which is Semper Gumby, always be flexible. I love that. Flexibility is really a sought after benefit and also something for leaders as well. So when you look at a creative approach, like you just said, every patient's different, every employee is different. When you make your workplace agile and ready to receive new innovation for the chaos it brings, then you make your group more survivable. I mean, it makes it more vital. Yeah.
Yeah, being flexible in the work environment really is key. And also, you have to be careful about when it's appropriate. Setting the rules, enforcing the rules, creating a stable, consistent, professional, respective work environment, those are key. And then choosing to be flexible when possible and when it's needed it is also key. But we have to remember that can't be at the detriment of the overall workplace culture or even the bottom line.
Right.
But after business hours or weekend work might be available for staff, like we talked about before. Remote work might be available to staff. Do what you can to be flexible in your work environment. asking for flexibility and providing flexibility. And that goes for administratively, clinically, or in association work.
Mhm.
Well, Jerry and Terry, thank you so much. I think we've gotten to our final slide for this. We'd like to now do this as open the floor to the audience for questions. Now, if you have attendees, if you have a question, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And I have one question here for you. This is for Terry. Terry, how can someone who is new to advocacy get involved? Where can they begin? What are some of your thoughts on that process?
It's a great question. And I would go to social media first, and I would look to see what's happening in your immediate environment in your state. We talked about the So Everybody Can Move movement. There are 8 states that have passed legislation, and I think there are 11 more that have active legislation. And there's probably about more than a dozen that are working to start legislation next year. So working with one of those groups is a great way to start. You can be an advocate in your community. You can work with the state association. You can work at mobility clinics. You can give of your time and your talents and your energy. And doing that, you find sometimes it's true. Giving is more than receiving. And there's so much to gain when you give of your time and your talents.
How true, how true. Jerry, a question for you here. What can an organization or management do to increase employee satisfaction and engagement? Can you give us a little more in-depth thoughts on that?
Yeah, the thing is, you're engaged, they're with you. They're with you not only for a job, they want to know how you're developing them. And so, how do you encourage them? How do you mentor them? How do you show them the way? Many times we've forgotten when we started out, we didn't know what the questions are, well, let alone the answers. Like, so, well, you need to just be part of the process, just like what Terry mentioned. You need to lean in. And it's kind of the paradox of life is that if you want to be a leader, you have to give more of yourself. You have to individually buy a book and learn something more. You have to fill the anxieties of your individual organization. If you really want to be effective in your career, then you're going to have to look at your organization, see where those gaps are, where the greatest anxieties are, and how you can help fill them. And I think when you do that, you find it much more rewarding, and you'll find that people do gravitate to you. So I try to encourage those people like that.
As Terry said before, also, it's self-fulfillment. I mean, you feel so much better about yourself when you do reach out and find something as opposed to just doing what you're being told to do. I have a question here from an attendee. The question is, obviously, there are many variables to everything being discussed today. Generally, though, what does the group, you two, feel is a reasonable number of patients by week, by month, by year to be seen by someone who is in a high burnout group of years 1 to 5? What can we expect?
Well, it's separated into orthotists and prosthetists.
Okay.
Orthotists and CPOs see the most. So they see anywhere from 7 to 9 patients per day on average from my survey. That actually is pretty similar to what it was seeing 10 or 15 years ago. The thing is that's different is the documentation is increased. So that's why when you look at how do I get better at that part, and we look to AI and other types of tools that maybe could help us consider the different types of things. Also, I really feel like when people say, how are my clinical skills going to be valued in the future? That's where outcomes really come in, because until then, all you're saying is, yeah, my patients are doing great. On a scale from 1 to 10, 4, I don't know. But if you're measuring how they do on the timed up and go, if you're measuring how far they're walking, if you're in the 4 square step test and you can measure that, then you can say at least my patients are very comfortable and very mobile.
The outcome measures are extremely important.
And
Yeah.
I'm not sure I have anything new to add to that other than we are really seeing the effects of the documentation requirements in the office with regard to, it used to be 15 minutes of paperwork and 45 minutes with a patient in the room, and now it's the reverse. And that's really challenging. So that's and just echoing what Jerry said, different for each patient, the requirements, orthotics, prosthetics, et cetera.
Coming from ABC's perspective, we know what the documentation is necessary. We know what it is to get paid and to get reimbursed and such. But from the view of and the surveyors, we're finding the documentation is getting better and better and better over the last 10 years. Everyone in the profession is doing a much better job. So kudos to you. Congratulations on it. I know what stress and what anxiety it causes.
Well,
Um,
Jim, if I may interject there,
sure.
that's because we have such great educators teaching our community to be better at documentation.
Great point. Great point. And we have two of our educators right on our panel right here. So, another question here. Let's see. Contributing to tapping into talent in the workplace. Let's see. How can new clinicians contribute to tapping into talent in the workplace? This is a pretty cool question, especially if the workplace culture has been established and potentially rigid for a number of years. How can those new clinicians come in and tap into that talent?
Jerry, do you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, in our office, we have a lot of residents. So we are accustomed to bringing people in and being the mentor and making sure that their experience is diverse and that they're not pigeonholed. So that's something that, if that can follow in, to other company cultures, larger cultures, that really we've run the gamut, right? With small business, medium size and large offices. So our business is a small business. So that's the perspective that we have, that we try to engage everyone in every step of the way. And Jerry, I'll, pass it back to you to elaborate.
Yeah, when you're facing a rigid group, the rigid, that's really out of confidence. And so sometimes I think this is from the perspective of the new employee. Sometimes you have to kind of show them gently just how beneficial it's been to other groups. And so their vision of the world is maybe a little bit closed off. So when you can show them the benefit and how this is very current, that can really help quite a bit. The other thing is to actually put some of yourself into it. Invest your time because you think it's relevant for your company. And it's not always glamorous. Not everyone's going to say, hey, thank goodness you've shown me the way. I remember this is like an old story, but my company was nervous about getting on the internet. So then I saved my lunch expense voucher that I had, and I got us on the internet for $15 a month. And so when my boss was in Norway, he's like, we don't have any presence on the internet. And I said, no, we do. Watch. And I clicked it. And so, yeah, you could be a little bit, adventuresome, and I registered their name. So go ahead and take a risk, take a gamble. Don't make it illegal or anything, but go ahead and take a risk for your company.
I do have a question here, another question. This is kind of interesting. When management values employees coming in early and staying late and doing paperwork at home, how are you supposed to protect the employee, or the employee is supposed to protect themselves from burnout when this is what is valued and rewarded? How is this clinician supposed to maintain a healthy work-life balance and feel appreciated when these are the things that management rewards?
Yeah. So I'll just start there by saying I am married to a clinician who works, I would say, definitely in excess of upwards of 60 hours a week. And our
Mhm.
business partner also does pretty much the same. And so for our staff, when they come in, I tell them, you are 8 to 5 with a 1 hour lunch. And that's all that is expected of you. And we want you to be here and bring your A game while you're here the entire time you're here, but please don't feel compelled to work as hard as they do. Do your job, be the best to the best of your ability in the amount of time you have, but you really have to be careful with that too. And again, we're a small business operation, so we have controls over that question.
Very
Jerry.
good.
Really it comes down, Jim, to the definition of the culture. One of the things you have to emphasize is that there is keen competition for very good process. We're not talking about average process. If you're a very good one, there is lots of competition for you. And the thing is that any group has to understand self-abuse should not be rewarded, right? That is not to be rewarded. They have sick days, you have vacation days. You should take them. They're planned, they're budgeted. And so the thing is that you really have to redefine that culture, because what'll happen is you think you're getting more work done, but what happens is people are just slogging it out. The Europeans, for instance, I've had the opportunity to work with them. They think we're crazy. They take a lot more time off. They take 1 month where everyone shuts it down. And actually, it works pretty well if you want to
Yeah,
think
and I
about
would
it.
just encourage, anyone who's in a situation like that to talk to their direct supervisor and then potentially um, bring it up the chain of command
Right.
because, yeah, the work-life balance is really critical here.
They
And
may
we
not even
look,
know. Yeah.
yeah, we've learned that over the years. We really have learned that, how important it is. A very specific question. The question is, quote, I've gone from working as an office administrator to a certified podorthist. First of all, congratulations to that person on that.
Yeah.
Any advice that you two, with all these years of experience, can help out with?
Well, I will just say, if you'd like me to start, Jerry, that when we have a school in Minnesota, and so we work really hard to try to employ as many people from the school as we can. When I teach, I know I one of my first questions in class is, how many of you are working in the O&P environment, and how many of you are not? And I would say a good 50 to 60% are not working in the O&P environment. So, we really want to try to get people in to the office. And that potentially means working as a front office administrator and not working in the back office. And clinicians, sometimes they're the master students, they would prefer to just be hands-on. But those who take us up on the offer really understand how critical it is to learn the documentation side and the passing of the paperwork while they're going through their program. So really expanding horizons, and thinking about some other ways to learn. So I am with you. I applaud the person that went from front administrator to podorthist, and there's all kinds of opportunities in the work environment for that.
Definitely. I had one old boss from engineering said, your technical knowledge will only take you so far, and we can say clinical knowledge. It's your interpersonal skills and ability to develop how the group in general works that redefine you. So I think that balance of clinical skills and interpersonal managing skills really do make a big difference. So those of you that are clinically minded are going to have to learn some management skills, and those that are in management really should learn some of the things that go on clinically.
And congratulations again to the, it's good you're going to have those, both of those skill sets. Our next question here, we do almost all of these tips and practices at our workplace. That's great, but still struggle with some drama between admin staff. Is there anything we can do to help mitigate this? Drama, can you believe it?
Drama, no place for drama. There's no time for drama in a day, in a work day. So that's going to be inherent in any work environment. And what do you do with that? I maintain and focus on a professional, respectful, productive work environment, and really shoot down anything else that's coming in the way of that. And so, again, if you start from the top down and you maintain that highest level of culture, then that will be expected and that will be carried out. And so I would recommend for that person to, again, go directly to their supervisor and then potentially bring it up the chain of command as appropriate. But we all need to work together. Right. And I say several times in my work environment, I don't care if you're friends outside the office. If you're not doing things and being together, joining, that's fine. I said, but in this office, this is the expectation. And so we do our best. I think we all fall short, but we do our best to carry that out every day.
The thing is that I mentioned that innovative groups, it's not that they don't argue, they just argue better. And so they argue with the idea of how do I execute this mission and vision better? But they'll still argue. The thing is that you have to avoid, and this is some groups that are not innovative, are cut off. When they're not talking to each other, when they're at war, and I'm at war with this person, that's when things need to really change, and that's when the relationship has become exceedingly charged. You may have in your office people who get sick a lot more. They could be at the center of the focus of all these charged relationships. And so you need to look at how your system is in general working toward that mission and vision. And if it's not, it requires, as we call, a managerial adjustment.
Exactly. And when it goes in a personal direction, that's when everything freezes and all work stops. Our next question here. Any advice for clinicians on how to upkeep your professional relationships along the same lines to keep a good clinical network when your company doesn't supply that?
This is a really good one. Do you know the main difference between novice and intermediate learner and someone who's an expert and specialist? And I don't care if it's upper limb, vacuum, you could say CAD CAM, osseointegration. The difference is the person who speaks, that's an expert or specialist, speaks to 5 times more people out of their office region, right? So they're the ones that actually surround themselves with others. Now, those of us that work within corporate entities or regional corporate entities have that naturally available. Those of us that work in smaller offices have to reach out to different types of organizations like the
But as Terry
academy,
was saying, you're networking.
like
Yep.
AOPA. You have to lean in and get those relationships. And that's why you go to those meetings. That's why we go to those meetings to make those networking connections. But here's a sad truth. It's going to depend on how effective you are in doing that. So you need to be active in those meetings. It's not just sitting down there listening to things. It's making those connections out of your region and trusting those enough to ask questions in the future.
And trusting others as well. I have our final question. Is increasing professional engagement, staving off burnout, something that can be started as early as residency or even while people are in school? Oh, we can plant that seed. What do you guys think?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I
Can't
mean,
say
we've talked about,
definitely enough. Yeah, go
yeah,
ahead, Terry.
we've talked about there's so many opportunities, as a student and as a resident, to further yourself, your educational aspirations and your networking opportunities, to attend meetings, to attend state meetings or national meetings. We just had the assembly, very successful assembly last week. Or excuse me, the academies meeting last week, and we have the assembly coming up in the fall. So these are two opportunities, to get continuing education, but also to network and to meet and to really dive in at a deeper level. Really hone into what your skill set is, what you'd like to do, see, touch, and feel devices, talk to people and the experts who are the manufacturers who are providing those devices at their booths, and explore the opportunities that you potentially have in this community. And there's a shortage of practitioners in our across the nation right now. So really, I think that there are lots of opportunities out there. So being open, and putting yourself out there, exploring options and attending these meetings, and talking to individuals, being a mentee, taking on a mentor. Those are all some suggestions. Jerry?
Being curious is so important. Asking those questions, presenting a poster, doing a free paper, get involved with your state association, and then just keep asking those relevant clinical questions like, why doesn't anyone do this? And those are really relevant, and you should count on that. And go ahead and be involved.
Yeah,
Excellent, excellent.
we've talked, if you don't mind, Jim, I'll just add,
Sure.
advocacy again, that is something that has been near and dear to my heart and which has kept me in this field. And so, I implore those of you who want to help in a different way, help your patients in a different way, to reach out, be an advocate. We've got lots of opportunities for you to do that at the state and the national level. And again, we do have the policy forum coming up, and that's virtual this year. So that's everyone is welcome to be a part of that program. And so look for that. I believe it's in the chat. And thank you.
Well, those are some great closing thoughts, which works out perfectly because we're coming to the close of our session here. I want to extend a huge thank you to both you, Terry and Jerry, for sharing your expertise and all of your insights. I also want to thank all of our attendees for participating in the discussion. We wouldn't have done this without you. And there is a link to the quiz for our continuing education credit. It'll be in the chat there also. I want to remind you that the Pop Talk, this is the first in a series of 3. The next Pop Talk is March 12th at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It is You're Hired, Finding and Training Your Best Team. And then the final session will be on March 27th at 12 noon as well on the Eastern Standard Time. Power of partnership, multi-generational pop teams, getting all the ages together and all the experience together. Now, there's a link in the chat to register for those. We hope you'll join us and invite other colleagues so they can listen to it as well. We thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope you just have a wonderful day. Thank you, Terry and Jerry, and thank you, everyone else. Have a great day.